The early histories of Pine Bluff often mention Harding Lake, which was situated in the middle of town. Although very pretty, the lake not only divided the town, it also prevented any growth to the south, just as the Arkansas River prevented growth to the north. During the 1870s, the lake was partially drained to help alleviate the problem, and the newly formed residential area became known as Lakeside. With the arrival of the railroad in the early 1800s, the population of Pine Bluff began to grow rapidly, with many prominent citizens building houses in the Lakeside area. During that time, the only Methodist church in Pine Bluff was First Church, the present-day First United Methodist Church. Its pastor was Reverend J.F. Carr. In December 1887, Reverend Carr convinced the annual conference to appoint Reverend C.B. Brinkley as the first pastor of a new church in the Lakeside area. Through the generosity of Mr. W.L. DeWoody, a plot of land at the southwest corner of 15th and Olive Streets was donated for the location of the proposed church. The first chapter of the Lakeside story had been written. On Sunday, December the 23rd, 1888, an article in the Pine Bluff Commercial stated, "The Methodist congregation is at work devising ways and means to build their new church over the lake." 3 months later, on March 27, 1889, the cornerstone was laid and the first services were held in the new sanctuary of Lakeside Church on September the 15th of the same year. In another article, the commercial described the new building, which was designed by Edmund Cook.
A very imposing structure as it stands among the green trees and is an ornament to our beautiful lakeside, with its shapely steeple and interior finished in native pine. The large windows, filled with rich designs in stained glass, furnish necessary light during the day. To light the church at night, beautiful hanging lamps and wall brackets were used. The pulpit and pews were works of art in ash and walnut.
In 1908, George T. Vining, one of the founders of Lakeside Church, wrote a letter to his children in which he told the story about his old friend Reverend John F. Carr holding cottage prayer meetings in the Vinings' home. Mr. Vining wrote,
"Later, Brother Carr said, Lakeside Church was conceived and built in those prayer meetings at your house."
This photo, which is the only known photo of the inside of the building, shows the original sanctuary decorated for the wedding of Frankie Clegg and Clem Farah. The church was formally dedicated by Bishop C.B. Galloway on March the 16th, 1890. In the letter to his children, Mr. Vining also said,
"We soon started and built the present Lakeside Church against considerable opposition from the mother church. They thought we didn't need it. After it was built, they said it would not be filled in 20 years. The congregation has outgrown it long ago and is preparing to build a fine new one."
In 1912, the original version of the present sanctuary was completed and ready for worship services. The new building was a beautiful structure in all respects, with a large stairway leading to the front entrance and a magnificent dome above the sanctuary. The dome consisted of stained glass windows all around, with a larger-than-life-size statue of an angel mounted on the top. It was said that when the church was lit at night, the dome could be seen all over the city. Although there are very few photographs of the dome, there are some stories about it. One of them, in Mrs. Anderson's book, was told by Pinky Curry. Carolyn Thies also remembers the dome as a child.
"I remember as a little boy sitting in Sunday night services and looking at that gorgeous, gorgeous cathedral dome. Few people can realize how gorgeous that dome was."
There was an angel on top of the dome, too. and she blew off. But they had her around for a while. I don't know whatever happened to her.
Due to problems with the structure and leakage, the dome was removed sometime between 1928 and 1931. By 1951, after careful planning and study, the decision was made to add an educational building to the existing facility. The new addition to the west side of the sanctuary provided plenty of room to house Sunday school classes, a space for youth groups, and a chapel.
It was a wonderful addition, and we were so proud of it at the time. It gave us a Sunday school room that we just did not have. For instance, when my Sunday school class always met downstairs in Fellowship Hall, just off to one side, and so this opened up a lot of possibilities for the Sunday school department.
In the 1980s, the current office area, a youth center, and additional Sunday school rooms were added to the south side of the building.
Lakeside, before it looked like it looks today, had several buildings around it, on different, I guess, lots, but somewhat connected to the church. And so I have a lot of old memories. One of the Sunday school classes that we had that I participated in was in a building. It was a house that, had evidently been bought by the church, the property there. And so it had been converted into a Sunday school room. And I loved that old house, going in there, and it just, the sun came through the windows so pretty and everything. And the room was full of people.
I remember some years ago they had trouble with the pews. They had to remove the pews, put in new pews. Okay. And that was quite a project at the time. And I don't recall what year that was, but the interior of the sanctuary, as best I can remember, pretty much the same. And it's such a beautiful thing. I don't know if we would ever want it to change.
Among the sanctuary's many beautiful features are the stained glass windows and the needlepoint banners and cushions. Carolyn Thies and Jane Nixon, both lifelong members of Lakeside, share some of their memories about these items.
My dad was singing in the choir. They had a quartet. I was lying in the pew, and I would love to look up into the dome because it was so beautiful. The colors were beautiful. But they had to take it out because the organ was vibrating, and it made the beams insecure that held the dome up. There was the Bible up over the chancel rail. And for years, I thought it was the front end of a car. And it was later that I found out it was the Bible. It was open. And my brother and I were intrigued with this window over here, where the angel is watching a child go across on a log. And the angel was holding up a hand. And my brother said, "That angel is stopping cars." The child was walking across a log, and the angel was looking out for the child. And then I remember looking over here. There's the picture of a man up there, and it happens to be John Wesley, but I didn't know who it was at the time. I used to ask the children, if I was doing the children's sermon, about if they knew who that man was up there on the window, and they never knew it was John Wesley. They liked to talk about the stained glass windows. The kids did. They were interested in it. And the woman was Ms. McCain. Doc McCain was her son. And Doc McCain married Miss Ruth McCain, and they lived over here on Olive Street. But it has a picture of angels. She had 4 children that died as infants. And then the McCain family was one of the very, very early families of Lakeside. So that's Miss McCain. Frank Reed was a doctor here. I knew it was his father who made the windows, those round windows. He was very, very good carpenter. Don't remember who did the stained glass windows for it. Later, caught on fire, and it broke out this first window here with the little roundel. But David, I think his name is David Seuss in North Little Rock, that does stained glass, and he reproduced it. He did a beautiful job. Not only the roundel, it was the window itself. Very lucky that they were here very quickly and took care of it. I know that the United Methodist Women, or it was the Women's Society of Christian Service, WSCS, that put in some windows back there. They were about missionaries and so forth. And people contributed to windows, and they have names on them, dedications by different families that gave the money for the windows. And I don't remember names right off the bat, but anyway. The chapel was built by the Couch family, Harvey Couch, that started APNL. And they dedicated the windows to their friends here in church.
In 1977, the new kneeling rails were installed. Willard Burks designed them so that they would accommodate kneeling cushions. Ed Matthews was pastor at that time, and he knew that Lucretia Brewster was an expert needlepointer, and he asked her to work with the Altar Guild to arrange for cushions for the kneeling rails. And I was the one who did work with her about it. I think I was chairman of the Altar Guild at that time. We brought a leading ecclesiastical needlepoint designer from New Canaan, Connecticut. Her name was Millie Holmes, and she came to Lakeside so that she could design the cushions. She decided on using the communion elements, wheat and grapes, for her designs. Members and friends of Lakeside funded and worked the pieces. A list of them is in the Lakeside Story by Nola Anderson, and it tells a lot about the whole procedure. And the women enjoyed doing the work very much. It was beautifully done. The banner, the Shields of the Apostles, was a picture of it was seen by Lucretia Brewster, who thought it would be a really nice banner for the church, and so she had Beth Calloway draw it on the canvas to be worked. It was done in petty point, very tiny stitches, and it is in the sanctuary at this time. The cross banner was done to honor Lucretia Brewster, who was just provided guidance and inspiration in the placing of needlepoint throughout Lakeside. And it contains, the cross banner contains many Christian symbols. Miss Hazel Dabney worked the piano bench cover with the cross and the flame, which is the symbol for the United Methodist Church. The pulpit chairs have, in the design, have flowers believed to have grown in biblical times. The Couch family funded and worked the needlepoint for the pulpit chairs. The Bible markers were done in Teddy Point to be used with the paraments. They fit the color of the paraments used in each season. The Alleluia banner was drawn by Diane Pierce, and someone asked me how long it took to work that, and I couldn't remember, but somehow 6 months came into my mind, and so the Alleluia banner was done in about 6 months. Alleluia means praise the Lord, and it was funded by Sidney Good in memory of his wife Winnie. There are other pieces in the chapel, and the kneelers there have the symbols of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and St. Paul. They were done in September of 1980. And in the chapel there's also an Alleluia banner. When Pastor Pam Estes was here, I asked her if she wanted any special piece of needlepoint for Lakeside, and she said she would like an Alleluia banner for the chapel. And so it was drawn, and that's where that came from. That's what I know about the needlepoint, and I think that Lakeside has enjoyed having these pieces.
During its 132 years, Lakeside has had 38 senior ministers and 19 associate ministers. Reverend Charles Brinkley served from 1887 until 1892. Although there's very little recorded information about Reverend Brinkley, we do know that he was born in Kentucky in 1849. Visitors to our sanctuary today can see one of the beautiful stained glass windows that is dedicated to Reverend Brinkley and his wife. In Mrs. Anderson's book, she spoke about each pastor and some of the events that connect them to Lakeside. Since her book was published in 1986, Lakeside has had 8 additional pastors. Reverend Sam Teague became Lakeside's 31st minister in 1991. During his time as senior minister, the congregation continued to flourish. Reverend Teague served as pastor of Lakeside until 1995. Reverend Charles Murray arrived at Lakeside in 1995 and served for 5 years. During his time at Lakeside, there was a lot going on, including a new roof for the sanctuary and the purchase of a home to serve as a parsonage for the associate pastors. However, even with all the physical improvements, Reverend Murray said that he was most proud of the services in Lakeside's beautiful sanctuary. He said, "My best memories are of the weekly Sunday services in Lakeside's beautiful sanctuary, and in particular the Christmas Day and Easter Day services." The year 2000 was the beginning of a new century. It was also the year that Reverend Mary Susan Hilliard came to Pine Bluff as Lakeside's first female senior pastor. During Reverend Hilliard's tenure, the Heart Rock Cafe was formed, merging the youth with a contemporary service. That, in turn, led to several members of the church forming a praise band which became known as the Purple Doors. It was also during Reverend Hilliard's time that the Hispanic ministry and worship service began to grow. Lakeside's 34th minister, Reverend George Williams, served from 2002 until his retirement in 2004. It was during this time that a large endowment was donated to the church. Due to the good stewardship of the Lakeside congregation, the endowment still exists and is used primarily to fund major renovations and upkeep on the church. Although this was a time when church attendance in general was declining, Lakeside continued to have a dedicated congregation. Reverend Jim Brooks arrived at Lakeside in 2004 and served for 6 years. One of the most exciting yet terrifying events at Lakeside during Reverend Brooks's tenure was the 2008 Christmas morning fire in the sanctuary. Although the damage was not as bad as originally thought, a stained glass window that was installed in 1912 was destroyed. In true Lakeside spirit, services were held 3 days later on December the 28th. Reverend Brooks said the spirit was good and everyone was relieved that the damage was no worse than it was. Reverend Pam Estes served at Lakeside from 2010 until 2016. It was during her time here that the history room came into existence. Originally a storage room, Pastor Pam had a vision and remodeled the room for the housing of the church's historical documents. On August the 21st, 2011, the room was formally named the Nola Anderson History Room. This room contains many historical artifacts and documents that help tell the Lakeside story. Reverend Steve Wingo became Lakeside's senior pastor in 2016 and served for 4 years until his retirement in 2020. Reverend Wingo said that the most meaningful thing to him during his time here was being a part of Lakeside's care and involvement in the Pine Bluff community. He especially enjoyed sharing the ministry of Masika and was always thankful for how Lakeside welcomed that ministry. Reverend Wingo, who was the minister during the initial stages of COVID-19 pandemic, said the stress of that time pointed out the significance of fellowship and hospitality of the Lakeside congregation. He said that he has fond memories of parking lot worship services during that time, along with the joy of people getting to honk and wave at friends that they had not been able to see in quite a while. Reverend Judy Rudd arrived at Lakeside in 2020 in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. With a new congregation and worship services limiting the number of attendees, Pastor Judy was faced with more challenges than perhaps any of her predecessors. However, the congregation soon learned that she was always up for a new challenge, and this was no exception. If the church could not come to her, she would go to them. Soon, Lakeside began streaming Sunday morning worship services on Facebook, and a new website was in place to keep people informed about what was happening at Lakeside.
That was when my dad got a job singing tenor in the quartet. And they paid him to sing in the quartet, and he gave half the money back to the church and saved the rest for my birth. He sang tenor. And Ray West's brother, Finus West, sang bass. Miss Marie Holman sang soprano. And I don't remember who the alto was, but anyway, they had the quartet. Yeah. Edgar Ammons became the organist and choir director. I was in the children's choir at that time. And they had the children's choir on Easter sit in the balcony, and the choir sang an anthem, and we sang the chorus and echoed it from the balcony. And I remember the words to it. Isn't that funny? Anyway, and they took a picture when Edgar Ammons was the choir director of the whole children's choir. I have a picture of that at home with the names written on the back.
My daddy had a beautiful voice and had sung in choirs, and he had even sung in a barbershop quartet when he was a younger fellow. So when he came to Lakeside, he did join the choir. And one thing I remember were choir suppers that we would have, potluck suppers occasionally for the choir would go. Then the choir members, after the potluck supper, of course, they would go to choir practices, would be on a Wednesday night. And so the spouses, some like my mother, wives, but there were also husband spouses of the soprano and alto sections of the choir, and the kids, and we'd all stay down in Fellowship Hall, and we kids would play, and I presume that the adults visited and waited for choir practice to be over.
My mother sang in the choir as an alto, and my father, I think, was a baritone. My poor oldest sister, Martha, would be in charge of all of us. And I can remember her trying to get us to behave, and we'd look up in the choir loft and see our parents glaring at us. And at one point, Martha got really embarrassed and just stormed out, and the woman, whoever was sitting in front of us, got onto us. So, Lakeside takes care of its own, raised all of us, and so, that was probably one of my earliest memories of misbehaving in church.
It was during, I think it was maybe Passover or something like that. And they had night church as well as morning church. And the choir was singing, but the chancel rail was high. And so when the choir sat down, the chancel rail hid the choir. And during the sermon at the evening service, Virgil Howard was the organist, and they had ordered milkshakes from the drugstore on the corner of Hardin and Main, the Star drugstore, and they would deliver the malts, and the choir would sneak out behind the choir chancel rail and sit on the steps and drink their milkshakes. And all of a sudden, the people started coming out of the church, and we had to run back in, and the minister had I don't know, he had an upset stomach or something like that. So he had asked that they sing the last hymn, and then nobody was there. And so he said, well, we'll have our dismissal prayer. And the people started coming out, and there we were drinking our milkshakes. So it was very embarrassing.
To listen to your word and voice to share.
I think it was during Mary Susan's time at the church, and she wanted us to try contemporary Christian service, and so she probably spoke to Dave Sadler first about it, and Dave spoke to several people. And I know at one point, I don't know if Dave, somebody said, gosh, if we could just find a drummer, and whoever it was had some drumsticks in their hand, and they fell out of that person's hands and rolled to the feet of Jesse Rocha, and Jesse picked them up, in a drummer's fashion, and he became the drummer. He was a drummer, and so he became the drummer for the Purple Doors. We went to the prison and the women's unit multiple times and performed there. It just kind of grew from there. Bill Wesson joined the church, and he was quite a musician, songwriter and musician, as Dave Sadler is. And his wife, Karen, was also a lovely singer, and we just had a lot of fun going different places, performing for the church, performing for just any kind of place where we could go to perform. But we just had a lot of fun with it. But I think that probably our best mission was going into the prisons and serving them.
And give our gifts and hope to those in need, to do the things that you would have us do. All you've given us returns to you.
While most churches keep many records, they are usually about the business of the church and perhaps a few major events. Thanks to the caring members of Lakeside who understand the importance of history, our church has a wealth of information about its past, of which a large part is included in Mrs. Anderson's book. In addition, the Nola Anderson History Room at Lakeside is a treasure for anybody who is curious about how things were in the early years. Visitors to the room can see the first organ that was used at Lakeside, as well as photos, scrapbooks, and personal items that tell the stories of former members and events of the past. B. Roby is the recognized historian for Lakeside.
At the time we were meeting, we met upstairs in the room which is now a storage room with the Christmas trees. Everybody was aging, and getting up and down those stairs became an issue, so they ended up letting us have Ed's old office, Ed Matthews' old office next, right down the hall. And that was our history room then for a good while. Then when Pam was here, this room was full of unused furniture from the church. It was piled high, nearly all the way to the ceiling. We had 6 or 8 feet here, and then furniture was just piled all on top of everything. And one day, Pam and I were in here working, trying to find some pieces of furniture we wanted to use, and so she said, "Wouldn't this make a nice history room?" And I said, "Yeah," or something, and I was busy working, and so we went along, and a little later she said, "Wouldn't this make a nice history room?" And after a while I said, "What are you trying to ask me?" I said, "Are you wanting this room? Or what are you talking about?" And she said, "Wouldn't this make a really good history room?" And I said, "Well, we have a washer and dryer in here, and I don't really think that's very conducive to a library." "Oh, it'd be all right." Anyway, that time they were adding Mikasa, and they needed an office for them. So they wanted Ed's old office for them to have.
Okay.
And so that's how then we started moving things in here. We had all the shelves built that are all on this wall and put in. And actually Nola, she still did come for a while, and then she got to where she couldn't come anymore. And we do have a lot of those copies, and they have moved them out of this storage room, and they've got them up in the office. What we had tried to do now, they did sell them for a while. We did for money for the history room, and then we've ended up now trying to give any new members that come in, give them a copy of the book now. But we do have quite a few left.
The members of Lakeside have always been known for reaching out to the community to help those in need. The Mikasa Ministry of Lakeside serves as an advocate to educate the Hispanic community and to aid in assimilation into their new world. The ministry serves as a window to facilitate communication between the English speaker and the Spanish speaker and seeks to share the gospel with our Hispanic community.
Mikasa, as it is known today, or when it was actually birthed, was I'm going to say in 2010. But prior to that, there was about 12 years that I actually worked the mission, if you will, on my own from my house. So in 1997 is when I like to say that Mikasa actually started, when I met the first family who needed help. And I spent a lot of time with this first family. They were in a very broken down trailer, mobile home. The raccoons were coming in through the holes in the floor and going through their trash. And then, like I said, about 12 years later, I felt like I was drowning in the work. I was the only one doing the work. And so Bill Jones had gone to the Emmaus Walk. Yeah, he came back very excited to do something great. And so he asked if I needed any help. And I said, oh, I could certainly use some help. We had a meeting with him at his office, and he wrote down what needs I had, like an assistant and just an office to operate out of, so I didn't do it from home anymore. And so he put together a plan and presented it to the administrative board, and they adopted it. And they, asked me to give it a name. And I said, well, all of the people with whom I have been working have found a home here at Lakeside. So I'd like to call it Mikasa, because Mikasa really means my house. That I saw it as an arm of the church, an extension of Lakeside. I never separated it from Lakeside. My point of view was God brought this work to Lakeside here in Pine Bluff for a reason.
My journey with Lakeside started approximately 2010. See, I used to do translations on the side, just help people, that were possibly going through the same circumstances that my family went through. And then they would just randomly, call my parents to see if I could go with them and translate at a school, translate, getting a car, getting a house, getting whatsoever. And I was still very, very young. I didn't really understand many of these things. Sometimes I didn't really want to help out because I had a fear, but I guess a lot of Hispanics just think, well, she can speak English, she's going to say exactly what I'm going to say. And once I turned 18, Miss Fry said, would you like a job with Mikasa? And that's when my journey began. And ever since, I think it has been the greatest choice I've ever made, working for Mikasa, because I not only enjoy it, but I get to do exactly what I love to do, which is helping people, helping my community. I was glad to know that that Mikasa in Lakeside were looking for someone to take over Mikasa again. I did have a job that I enjoyed doing, but it was very demanding, and it was just not working out with my son's schedules and needs. And I decided to take on this journey with Mikasa. I was very excited to finally be back and do what I like to do. I have a lot of plans for Mikasa, and I believe that together we're gonna make them happen. Some of the things that I'm doing now are ministries or ministry events, that I'm trying to involve our neighborhood, the Hispanic community. Some of them include food distributions. We're also doing Midweek Manna, which is a after-school program for kids. We're providing tutoring. At the same time, we're having a youth meeting, and then we're providing English classes for parents and an activity class for mothers. Every fathers are welcome to join, but it's usually the moms that come and bring the children, So we've called it activities for moms, and definitely my plan is to have at least one big thing per month, if I'm able to have something big, major per month, then I very much call myself successful at it. I want people to continue seeing Lakeside and Mikasa as one. Mikasa has been going for several years already, and I'm finally getting to see that Mikasa and Lakeside are beginning to look like one. I don't want Lakeside to see us as a trophy. I want Lakeside to see us as part of them. After all, we are a ministry of Lakeside.
Corrie ten Boom once said, "Memories are not the key to the past, but to the future." As we review some of the memories and recall some of the people and events that made Lakeside what it is today, let's also look forward as the Lakeside story continues for future generations.
Very large class. We had like 60 people on the roll, and we usually had around 30 people for attendance, something like that, in that range. Sometimes it'd be more.
Lakeside had a very active MYF youth group, and of course we had what was called a sandwich supper, and so that was popular. But not only just with the youth here at Lakeside, we had other teenagers that would come. It so happened that W.E. and Diane Ayers had recently moved to Pine Bluff and joined Lakeside, and they became our leaders for our MYF group, and we all just loved them. They were young, they were vivacious, they were great inspirational leaders for us. We even had hay rides.
Our son was born in October of 1958 and was christened sometime shortly after that. Brother of McCormick, I believe, was the minister. And when our son Gordon was baptized, they were standing here with the pastor and the family, and my wife Carolyn was holding Gordon, and Gordon started to squirm, and so Carolyn bent over and set him down, and he reached up and grabbed her hat, which had a big broad piece around it, and he grabbed that hat and he started running up the aisle, and it was bedlam.
The idea for Shepherd Center started in 1975 by a Methodist minister in Kansas City, Missouri, to have a place for senior adults to get together, kind of an interfaith group, for them to have a place to get together and meet for fellowship and activities. And then that evolved to Shepherd Centers of America. And early, somewhere around 1983, there was a group of people, and there were some people from Lakeside involved in that also, decided to form a chapter here or connected with Shepherd Centers of America. Later 1980s, it started meeting permanently at Lakeside and met at Lakeside continuously from then for over 30 years. Well, the idea was to have a place where people could come for fellowship and activities. We said a place if you wanted to meet new friends, if you wanted to bring your old friends. And it was something that was very, very popular with the community. And it was open to anybody who wanted to come. And that was what we heard a lot about, was people said, it was open to people from all over this area, and even people from out of Jefferson County came. Definitely considered that one of a large ministry. We had probably 150 people participating. It reached a lot of people, and we had a lot of comments of people thanking us. We just loved coming here, and Lakeside was so welcoming to everybody. Probably the most rewarding organization I have ever been a part of. And I just would like to thank Lakeside for being so welcoming to everyone and for hosting it for 30 years. It's just, it was a wonderful mission of Lakeside.
Well, you know, the thing about Lakeside is that you don't just see people at Lakeside, is you see them out in the community, and they know people, and people know you. You would be surprised if you visited, someone there would know you, because we have so many people different from walks in the community. And I feel like we're a welcoming church. People will walk up and talk to you and speak to you, and will be glad to see you. And that's why. And it has some good things to offer, and mission work that you could do if you're interested in that. Especially now, we're really working on a feeding ministry, and we're also working with Masika to help so many people, Hispanics in the community that need help. So there's many opportunities for you to participate in the life of the church.
Lakeside has always been known as a warm, caring, inviting church. And people felt, I have heard other people who joined the church say that when they moved to Pine Bluff and they would visit some other churches, they just always, when they came to Lakeside, they felt welcomed.
When I was 9, Ed Matthews was my pastor. And I remember one day being in my backyard, playing with my best friend, Mystic. And it was so strange to see Ed Matthews come to that back door, and he told my best friend to go home and that I needed to come inside. And I thought, that's not like Brother Ed. Even at 9 years old, I thought that's unusual. And when he brought me into that back porch, and my sister was in there, and he had to sit down on the couch. And he let us know that my dad had died. You know, he broke that news for my mother and then brought us into the room to be with her. But I remember for years after that, my mother talking about how Lakeside came into our house. They fed us. They washed our dishes. They ran our dishwasher and emptied our dishes. They just took care of us. And that's one of the big reasons that I'm so devoted to Lakeside, because they have been my family all these years.
When your worries make you weary, when you're beat down on the ground, when the chains of this world have tied you down.
Someone called and asked me to teach Sunday school, 4th grade Sunday school. And I don't even remember who called me. And that was the class my nephew was in. So I thought, well, that'll be good. I need to do that. So I started teaching Sunday school, and I've been here pretty much every Sunday that I can since. And then I worked with the youth some. We had a new youth director, and he really didn't know very much, but he knew he needed help, and he knew my brother, so therefore he thought he knew me, and he asked me to come one night. And I said, okay, I'll come. He said, can you think of some kind of game or stuff to do with the kids? So I did that. And so when I got ready, he says, well, I'll see you next Sunday. And therefore, somehow or another, I started working with the youth.
We will gather at the river, we will meet down by the shore, we will sing God's praise forevermore. We will walk with Jesus, we will hold his hand, we'll make our home in the promised land. Peering through the darkness, looking for a sign, when all at once it hits me and it's been here all the time. A ray of golden sunshine streaming on my face, a sign that I am living here by God's eternal grace. A gift I didn't purchase, but a gift I know is mine. Living in the knowledge that I'm using borrowed time. I'm using borrowed time. He's using borrowed time. I'm using borrowed time. He's using borrowed time. I'm using borrowed time. I'm using borrowed time. He's using borrowed time. A gift I didn't purchase.
Since its birth in 1890, Lakeside has continued to be a vibrant congregation. Unfortunately, as with many churches, a declining population in the city and an aging congregation began to take a toll. In 2020, the COVID pandemic caused even more decline, but the faithful continue to worship and reach out to help the community. Although the pews are not as full as they once were, those who attend Lakeside United Methodist Church today still love their church as much as the congregation that worshiped in that first sanctuary 132 years ago. Above all else, they understand that it is not about the building, rather it is having the presence of God and the Holy Spirit dwelling in the lives of every member that will allow the Lakeside story to continue for many years to come.